I began all that jazz, excited to see a great musical film, perhaps one with some clever social commentary or meta elements here and there, a la Singing in the Rain. Instead, what I ended up with was 8½ meets The Seventh Seal. The film ended up as a rhythmic, melodic phantasmagoria, one which lulled me into its own darkness using catchy melodies and rhythm as its net. Obviously, the film is Bob Fosse's pseudo-autobiography, but it's a lot more than that. Just like Fellini, who explored his own youth, upbringing, and experiences as a way to explore issues of universal worth, Fosse here uses his life, his work, and his heart attack scare as a way to hold a mirror up to us. We see ourselves in these experiences, even if we share nothing in common with Fosse, professionally, dispositionally, or emotionally. The point isn't to relate to Fosse per se, though for those that do, this would surely help with the film's emotional punch. But for the rest of us, the movie is about understanding the art, quote-unquote, of our own lives. The things we set out to do, our responsibilities, our flaws, our relationships, our successes, and our failures, and what it all means within those final few minutes of life. The film starts with moments of demystification. Joe Gideon wakes up, he prepares and showers, seeming barely able to keep himself together. This is a framing device which continues throughout the movie. It's not only used to establish Gideon's worsening health, but also as a way to represent the fatigue that comes with creating great art, and as a reminder that those who create art, no matter how much they try to portray themselves otherwise, are flesh and blood human beings just like the rest of us. Their successes and continuing output are reliant on the biological reality of their bodies. The movie does many things throughout to re-establish the theme of physical bodies as they relate to art, with the morning framing device being the most grounded and subtle, almost as if it's the least colored by, or the most remote from, the pomp and spectacle of show business. After this, we're introduced to a montage which shows us more of the working machinery behind showbiz. In this case, it's related to the act of discovering talent, much of which is tarnished by a little bit of right place, right time, a limited number of opportunities, and even unmeritocratic factors like attractiveness or flattery. Gideon's character isn't callous to the way his industry forces him to treat people. The movie never absolves him of his flaws, but it does establish pretty thoroughly that he's not lacking in any self-awareness about them. If anything, these flaws are what contributes to his stress and bad health. He's in an environment where sacrifices of pure morality are required, and also an environment rich with temptations. None of this excuses him, but it does three-dimensionalize his character, making him the perfect stand-in for our own flaws and hypocrisies. Again though, this underlines the main theme of the unglamorousness which exists behind the curtain of entertainment. All that jazz and centering that unglamorousness by being such an experience of demystification ends up being, along with Apocalypse Now, one of the best ways to cap off the period of the 1970s where demystification was the goal in Hollywood, perhaps for the first and only time ever. The movie, though, doesn't demystify show business for the sake of sullying it or to lessen it in any way. If that were the case, the musical numbers wouldn't be so immaculately directed, choreographed, or performed. Not only is Fosse making a film about himself, but also a film about talent itself, the way it dredges up beautiful moments, feast for the eyes and ears, using extreme levels of discipline, talent, and all done while enduring great deals of stress. There's no way we can see all that, then later see the product of it without having an appreciation for all the various art forms involved here. In other words, the film doesn't demystify as a form of criticism, it demystifies in order to establish entertainment as a labor. And by doing so, labor's role in life then becomes the subject. We live our lives working towards projects, whether we have artistic aspirations or whether the projects we work on are of a more practical nature. The fact is, we all have many things we're pouring our time and work into, and once we're gone, our work ends, even if our death is inconvenient. If we're lucky, we'll have someone there to take our place. Or maybe if we're even luckier than that, we won't. One of the clever aspects of the film is the way it works Fosse's experience with making the Lenny Bruce biopic, Lenny, into the plot using a fictionalized film about a different but similar comedian. Like with Bruce, this comedian approaches subjects of a grave nature, specifically the subject of mortality, an issue which was especially pertinent in Bruce's case. That footage then, which is shown to us multiple times in the context of it being edited by Gideon, then, in an especially meta turn, is edited throughout the film in order to re-emphasize the humor and irony of mortality. In this way, the movie doesn't just end up being an amazingly well-edited film, but also becomes a film about editing, its power and its implications. It's a film about life and its non-linearity, at least in terms of that life as we remember it. Joe Gideon, like Fosse himself being dead, will be remembered in snippets and anecdotes, all of which exist without real-world context undergirding them. His life, like everyone's, becomes a collage in the minds of those who remember them, with those who are the most distant from him having the most consistent, if not most accurate, picture. The closer we get to the man or woman, the more intimate we know them, the more our quote-unquote collage becomes unique to ourselves. themselves. The intimacy behind the scenes of entertainment, whether it's romantic, familial, or occupational, becomes one of the most important elements of this film, and is also what contributes to the spectacle of the art just as much as art contributes to life, and this is why the film ends the way it does. For those who create art, their own life being capped off with a satisfying conclusion, one similar to the kind seen in their own work, would be an absolute dream. In this case, that's quite literal. The musical numbers at the end, being show business at its most grave, also become show business at its most universal, as if the point is that life itself is the show, a fact which is hidden from us by the illusion of life. Gideon's death fantasies, rather than an escape from the truth, is his way of facing the truth head-on. And to be honest, what difference does it make anyway? The things we see in the last few musical numbers, the singing, the dancing, the camera work, and of course the editing, are all real from our perspective. They were actually choreographed and filmed, and are being presented before us. Gideon wasn't imagining anything fantastical in the end, at least not in terms of possibility. What makes the end a fantasy is to believe anyone could receive such a perfect send-off on their way out. The movie ends with a bang, just as Gideon imagines his life to. After the fanfare, the spectacle, the diving headfirst into cosmic irony, and the excesses of self-mythology, the final demystification, perhaps the best in film history, comes with a sudden jump cut. There's definitely a cynicism there in that startling and unglamorous image, but I don't see it that way. Whether death is a hard cut to black, or whether it's only a transition to something new, the fact remains. Every show eventually ends. Of course it does. If it didn't, we wouldn't have time for our own show.
It's showtime, folks.